Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Local Review Body of the 25th of November 2025. I can confirm that the meeting has been properly called and is quorate. Can I first ask members to appoint a chair for this meeting, please? Any
Can I
nominations?
suggest Councillor Jim Dempster?
Thanks, Councillor Blake. Councillor Dempster, are you happy to assume the role of chair?
After no other nominations, yes, aye.
Thank you, Chair. Have you got a copy of the notes there?
I have indeed. Good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Local Review Body. This meeting has been live streamed and recorded, and the recording will be made available on the Council website for public listening. Remote participants, please follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off your video when you're not addressing the meeting, writing speak in the Teams chat function when you want to contribute. No material should be posted in the chat function if it is intended as part of the discussion. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. Similar to the process now followed at full council, when considering motions or amendments which are substantive in nature, I will call a recess where necessary so that I may seek governance advice on competency. This is good practice in governance terms and will also provide for governance to be able to collate and circulate the terms of the said motion or amendment to members in order that they have the opportunity to properly review it. I hope this process makes matters more effective, and I seek members' support in implementing this. All members should speak clearly and directly into the microphone when making contributions, and when referring to reports, please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone to follow. Members may notice that when calling members to speak, I will refer to them formally using their title, for example, Councillor Jones, so that it's clear to who are councillors and who, by the process of elimination, are officers. Tracy Governance, can you confirm the sediment and apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. We've got 4 members present in total, 1 member present here at Council HQ in person, and that's Councillor Maureen Johnston. 3 members present on Microsoft Teams, being the Chair, Councillor Blake and Councillor Giusti. I had 1 apology from Councillor Thompson, and not present at the start of the meeting is Councillors McFarlane and Slater. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tracy. Item 3, declarations of interest. Do any members have a declaration of interest they wish to make? I have none. And I don't see any other indication that anyone else has any declaration. So, Tracy, can you now take the Local Review Body through the documents and papers for the meeting, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So we have 1 notice of review for consideration at the meeting today, and that is item 4, Kenway House, Parton, Castle Douglas. Refusal of planning permission for alterations, extension and change of use of domestic outbuilding to form annex accommodation and installation of septic tank and soakaway, reference 250610 FUL. So your index of contents within your papers, you have your notice of review dated the 15th of September 2025, submitted by Evans Rural Architecture Agents on behalf of Mr and Mrs P Wilson, the applicant, and that was received on the same day, and that's found on pages 17 to 24. You then have your report on handling determined under delegated powers and related correspondence on pages 27 to 67. Further comments from representatives and observations of the appointed officer on the applicant's agent's notice of review are on pages 71 to 88. Then comments of the applicant's agent on further comments from representatives and observations of the appointed officer are on pages 91 to 92. The planning application form submitted on the 27th of March 2025, associated plans and supporting information registered as valid on the 28th of March 2025 is on pages 95 to 131. The decision letter from Dumfries and Galloway Council dated the 16th of June 2025 is on pages 135 to 139. Your relevant extracts from the Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2 and National Planning Framework 4 can be found on pages 143 to 175, and photos of the application site and the locality are on pages 179 to 181. So the grounds for refusal, which can be found pages 131 to 138, are: 1. The proposal is contrary to the policy of the Council as stated in Dumfries and Galloway Council Local Development Plan 2, Policy H2, and to national policy as set out in the Scottish Planning Policy, which permit the erection of new houses in villages in only special circumstances identified in development plans, and none of these circumstances apply in this case. Furthermore, the proposed domestic annex fails to accord with Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan policies OP1, OP2 and H8, and supplementary guidance on alterations and extensions to houses on the grounds that this is significantly overlarge and overbearing, and as a result of the prominent position of the proposed domestic annex, the massing, scale and design would be unsympathetic to and not respect the adjacent dwelling house or the overall street scene. 2. The proposal would result in an increase in land use vulnerability in a location identified as being at medium risk of flooding, and it has not been demonstrated that the development would not be at an unacceptable flood risk, contrary to National Planning Framework 4, Policy 22, and Dumfries and Galloway Council Local Development Plan 2, Policy IN7. And 3. The development would not retain the form of a traditional outbuilding contrary to MPF 4, Policy 9, or be sympathetic to or respect the local built form of the area, contrary to LDP 2, OP2 and MPF 4, 17A in terms of design quality and placemaking. Furthermore, the development could give rise to a potential material loss of privacy to adjoining residents, contrary to OP1A. On page 20, the applicant has asked that the review be dealt with on the basis of the relevant information provided, without any further procedures, written submissions, hearing sessions or site inspection. So the grounds stated in the Notice of Review statement on pages 23 to 24. In summary, apologies, I've got the wrong notes here. Sorry, Chair.
You're fine, Tracy.
The annex is neither overlarge or overbearing in relation to the existing dwelling house, which is what it should be assessed against. In comparison to the two-storey host dwelling houses, the annex is single-storey with a ridge level 2.5 metre lower and a flood area of less than half of the host dwelling house, approximately 45%. The massing, scale and design of extension are unauthentically modern, which provide a welcome contrast to the traditional outbuilding, and materials have been carefully considered to complement the existing properties. In terms of its supposed prominent position, there is some established and mature planting to the north of the property adjacent to the road, which provides screening to the property. The bulk of the extension is located to the south, away from the road, and that the north elevation towards the road is the least altered elevation. Therefore, there would be minimal impact on the street scene. With regard to potential flooding issues, consider the proposal to be an extension to the dwelling house, and following guidance given to the Planning Applications Committee by officials at its meeting of the 19th of December 2023, domestic extensions are not subject to the same flood risk considerations as new built projects. There appears to be some confusion over the development type and description. Do not consider that the annex should be considered a new build. The floor area of the existing outbuilding is only 15 square metres. Therefore, it was not simply not possible to convert this without an extension. However, the proposal still only provides a compact one-bedroom property, which will be unfeasible if made smaller. The existing ridge height and style and profile of the roof have been deliberately retained in order to retain the character of the building and to ensure there would be no adverse effects on the neighbouring property. Proposed materials include a slate roof and timber cladding, which would complement and enhance the local built area. The alternative proposal would be to demolish the outbuilding and to add an extension to the dwelling, which would be a less desirable solution and would result in loss of traditional outbuilding. Please note it may be possible to add an extension to the dwelling under permitted development, which does not have a restriction on the floor area. In relation to comments that the development could give rise to a potential material loss of privacy of adjoining residents, the proposed extension would not project forward of the neighbouring property, but still approximately in line to continue the building line to the south. Noting concerns about the external decking area, the applicant would be happy to reduce this area to a size sufficient for a table and 2 chairs. As a one-bedroom property, it would have a maximum of 2 occupants, and therefore any noise or disturbance would be extremely unlikely. The applicant would be happy to provide a new timber fence or hedgerow to replace the post and wire fence between the neighbouring property to the west, Old Station, which would provide more additional screening and buffering between the properties. You then have your development plan policies listed on pages 143 to 175. So the main issues for the local review body to consider are members satisfied that this application is not an application for a dwelling house, but for alterations and extensions to an existing outbuilding without the curtilage of an existing dwelling house, as put forward by the applicant's agent on page 91 of the papers? If so, are members happy to proceed to determine the case against the terms of MPF 4 policies 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 9, 12 and 22, and the Local Development Plan 2 policies OP1, OP2, H3, HE3, NE2, NE5, IN7, IN8 and IN9? If so, would members wish to determine the case without reference to LDP2 supplementary guidance, housing in the countryside, or are members willing to agree with the reasoning set out in paragraph 4.5 of the delegated report on page 31 as to why the proposal should be considered primary against housing policies? How much weight would members wish to give the non-statutory guidance on residential annexes referenced in the case officer's report on handling at page 30? Are members satisfied that the proposal would meet the terms of the guidance on proposed residential annexes set out in section 6 of LDP2 supplementary guidance document on alterations and extensions to dwellings, which is part of the adopted development plan? If members are minded to consider this application under the relevant plan and policies for a new dwelling house, would the proposal fail to accord with the terms of Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2 Policy H2? Are members satisfied that the proposal would fail to accord with terms of Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2 Policies OP1, OP2, H8 and related supplementary guidance on alterations and extensions to dwellings? Specifically, would the proposal be significantly over large and overbearing? Would the massing, scale and design of the proposal be unsympathetic to and not respectful of the adjacent dwelling houses and the overall street scene? Would the proposal result in an increase in land use vulnerability in a location identified as being at medium risk of flooding? Has it been demonstrated that the development would not be at unacceptable risk of flooding, contrary to National Planning Framework 4 Policy 22 and Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2 Policy IN7? Would the proposal fail to accord with the terms of MPF 4 Policy 9 on the basis that it would not retain the form of a traditional outbuilding? Would the proposal fail to accord with Part A of MPF 4 Policy 17 and LDP 2 Policy OP2 by not being sympathetic to and not respecting the local built form of the area in terms of design quality and placemaking? Would the proposal fail to accord with Part A of LDP 2 Policy OP1 by giving rise to a potential loss of privacy to adjoining residents? If it is considered that the proposal does not accord with the terms of the development plan, are there a set of material considerations of sufficient weight to justify a departure from the terms of the development plan? If so, on what grounds would such a decision be made, and what reasons would members give for such a decision if it was considered that the proposal departs from the terms of the development plan? If members are minded to reverse the appointed officer's decision and instead grant planning permission for this proposal, what set of conditions and reasons would members wish to see attached, if any? Would members wish to attach the following condition to make clear the permitted use of the proposed development and to ensure that it's explicitly not a dwelling house, being that the existing dwelling house and the extension hereby granted planning permission shall remain part of the same single interconnected residential planning unit. Once the extension has been implemented, neither the existing dwelling house nor the extension shall be sold, leased, or otherwise disposed of for use as a separate dwelling without a further grant of planning permission. If members are instead minded to vary the terms of the appointed officer's decision, what changes to the specific reasoning for the decision would be required and which additional policies, if any, would be referenced. So having outlined the documents within your papers, it now falls to the local review body to determine whether it has sufficient information to consider the review. It is confirmed that no representations from any party will be heard today. The options available to the local review body are to decide you have sufficient information before you to enable you to determine the review today, request further information in the form of written representations. The local review body will be required to state precisely the information you're seeking and who would provide it. Resolve to hold a hearing, again specifying who will be invited to speak and on what matters. Or resolve to hold a site visit, accompanied or unaccompanied. This can be done in conjunction with any of the above, but would obviously not allow a decision to be made today. If the local review body resolves that it has sufficient information and that no further procedure is required, then the local review body has full powers to uphold, reverse or vary a determination. The decision notice will include a statement of the terms in which the planning authority has decided the case reviewed. A planning advisor is present at your meeting in relation to this case. It is confirmed that he has not had any involvement with this case prior to the submission of the notice of review, and he was not the case officer or the appointed officer for the application. He is purely here to provide independent advice as needed on matters of planning policy, law or process. A solicitor is also present here today, and he will act independently if the local review body require any specific advice on matters of law. So if members are clear and no further clarification is required, I will ask the Chair now to lead the debate and in the first instance lead the review body through the agenda papers together and decide if you have sufficient information to make a determination today. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Tracy. So I think what we'll do, if members are in agreement, we'll go through the index of contents again. When we've got to the end of that particular exercise, we'll ask our planning officer if he has any other information that he feels should be shared. We'll look at the pictures, although they're on our papers anyway, and then we'll decide whether we've enough information before us to proceed. So, in terms of the index of contents, the first section is Notice of Review dated 15th December 2025, submitted by Evans Rural Architecture agents on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. P. Wilson, the applicant, and received on the same day, pages 17 to 24. Does anyone have any questions on the Notice of Review? And I'll take silence as no. In that case, the next section is Report on Handling, determined under Delegated Powers, and related correspondence, pages 27 to 67. Anyone have any questions on the Report on Handling? 3 further comments from representatives and observation of the appointed officer on the applicant's agent's Notice of Review, pages 71 to 88. Any further questions on the further comments from representative and observation of the appointed officer? In that case, we'll go to section 4, comments of applicant's agent on further comments from representatives and observation of the appointed officer, pages 91 to 92. In that case, section 5, planning application form submitted on the 27th of March 2025, associated plans and supporting information registered as valid in the 28th of March 2025, pages 95 to 131. In that case, move on to section 6, decision letter from the Friesen Gallery Council dated 16th of June 2025, pages 135 to 139. Any questions on the decision letter? In that case, we go to 7, relevant extracts from National Planning Framework 4 and the Friesen Gallery Local Development Plan 2, pages 143 to 175. Section 8, photos of the application site and the locality pages or page 179 to 181. And finally, the grounds of refusal, page 137 to 138. So you've already heard Tracy read out what the grounds of refusal were. The proposal is contrary to the policy of the Council of State and Galloway Council Local Development Plan 2 Policy H2 and the national policy and set out in the Scottish Planning Policy, which permits the erection of new houses and villages and only in specific circumstances, identified development plans, and none of these circumstances apply in this case. Furthermore, the proposed domestic annex fails to record with Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan policies OP1, OP2 and H8 and supplementary guidance on alteration and extension to houses on the grounds that it significantly overlaps and overbearing, and the result of the prominent position of proposed domestic page annex 137 annex, the massing, scale and design would be unsympathetic to and not respect the adjacent dwelling houses or the overall street scene. Second reason, the proposal would result in an increase in land use vulnerability and location identified as being at medium risk of flooding, and it has not been demonstrated the development would not be at an unacceptable flood risk, contrary to National Planning Framework 4 Policy 22 and Dumfries and Galloway Council Local Development Plan 2 Policy IN7. And the third reason, development would not retain the form of a traditional outbuilding, contrary to NPF 4 Policy 9, or be sympathetic to or respect the local built form of the area, contrary to LDP 2, OP2 and NPF 417A in terms of design, quality and placemaking. Furthermore, development could give rise to potential material loss of privacy to adjoining residents, contrary to OP1A. So we have our planning officer, Robert Duncan. I take it Robert's here to offer us any advice that we might request. So Robert, do you have any additional information you wish to share with elected members at this time? And if not, can you take us through the pictures of the application site that are already in our papers, please? And then I'll move to a debate with members.
Thanks, Chair. I do have some further observations. I was obviously looking through the papers before the meeting today, and I thought the following would be helpful. It's obviously within your gift to make a decision today, but when I look at it was puzzling me slightly, but when I looked at the original proposal that was submitted, the planning application and the description it was given, it was described as alterations, extension and change of use of domestic outbuilding to form holiday letting accommodation and installation of septic tank and soakaway. Now that wasn't immediately obvious to me in the papers, so it started off with that description. The consultation requests were sent out. Now you can see in your papers that you have consultation responses from the Council's Roads Planning Team Leader, Scottish Water, NATS Safeguarding and the Council's Flood Risk Management Team Leader, but those consultation responses were in relation to its original description, so they were basically looking at that as holiday accommodation, in other words, a dwelling house. Now, if you also look at your papers on page 57, you've got an email from the agent to the case officer on the 19th of May 2025, and that expresses dissatisfaction with the way the proposal's been described and suggests actually that this is for residential accommodation. Now, at that point, in the wake of that email, the description of the application has been changed. So what you have after that point, I don't know exactly when it was, but after that point, it was called alterations and extension of domestic outbuilding and dwelling house to form annex accommodation and installation of, sorry, that's not right. It was the description you've got in front of you now, which is, I'm moving on, getting ahead of myself, Chair, apologies. The description of the case was then changed to alterations, extension and change of use of domestic outbuilding to form annex accommodation and installation of septic tank and soakaway. I do have, looking at the case, I'm just slightly concerned because an annex is residential accommodation within the curtilage of a dwelling house, so it's not actually a change of use. And I'm just putting this out there, but I wonder if the description of the case would more properly be alterations and extension of domestic outbuilding and dwelling house to form annex accommodation and installation of septic tank and soakaway, because I think that encapsulates what the proposal is for now. The next thing arises as a difficulty because when you look at the first part of the reason for refusal 1 on the decision notice, which is on, you read it out earlier, on page 135 to 139 of your plans, the first part of that decision relates to a dwelling house, when I actually don't think it's a dwelling house proposal that is now in front of you. It was originally, clearly, but the proposal's since been changed during the course of the application. The other point in relation to reason 2, I'm slightly concerned with reason 2 as well, because this is a development now within the curtilage of a dwelling house. It's not a change of use, it's not the creation of an additional dwelling house. And therefore, the issue with the SEPA flood risk and land use vulnerability guidance of July 2024, it relates to most vulnerable users, including basement dwellings, isolated dwellings and sparsely populated areas, dwelling houses submitted behind informal embankments, caravans, mobile homes, chalets, and it also has guidance for highly vulnerable uses, including buildings used for dwelling houses, but it doesn't actually make any reference to residential annexes on the basis that they're in the same use class, if you like, as the dwelling house, because they're within the curtilage of the dwelling house. So I'm therefore not convinced that reason 2 is something that should be carried forward. But those were really the key observations I felt I should bring to your attention. And like I say, it was only when I went through the papers before the meeting today that I noticed all of these things. So that's something to consider, and we can come back to that in due course, Chair. It's obviously entirely within your gift as to how you want to proceed and what decision you take in this case. So from there, I think we can move on to the photographs, and these replicate, there's 6 photographs here, replicate what's in your papers in pages 179 to 181. I haven't been out in the site. The captions have been given to me by the case officer. You've also got other photos in your papers on pages 43, 66 and 75, which should be helpful. So the first picture, this is a view looking east along the A713 public road. I know that the application site is on the right-hand side here. The next view is looking in the opposite direction, so this is looking west along the A713 public road. And then you've got a view from the A713 public road looking south, and this is towards the application site. So you'll see the drawings you've got on pages 119 and pages 121 of your papers. Those show the existing and proposed arrangements. So you have the building, which is the subject of the application, on the right-hand side here, in the curtilage of the dwelling house on the left-hand side. For the avoidance of doubt, the building you can see on the right-hand side is known as the station, or alternatively Parton Station. And that shows it in context. So you've got the former station building there on the right-hand side, which is also a dwelling house, and the A713 in the foreground. This is a view from within the application site. This is looking west towards the existing building, which is obviously used for purposes ancillary to the dwelling house. And that's a view from within the site looking north towards the traditional building. Station house again is to the left-hand side there. So this is looking almost, you can't see it, but it's almost looking towards the direction of the A713. Happy to answer any questions as well, Chair. Thanks.
Thanks, Robert. I've got 2. I thought I read in the papers that although it was no longer to be for a holiday let, that the use would not be confined to the current occupants of the building, that it would be for family and friends use. And I think that was what the case officer was using as a reason for their decision as well. And I think the other thing that I read in the papers was that because of the size of the proposed extension, the consideration of the flooding was still relevant. I don't know whether you can help me with these 2 questions or no.
I think in relation to the first question, Chair, I'm best directing you to the email from the agent to the case officer of the 19th of May. So that's on page 57 of your papers, and that seems to be the point at which, I mean, I can read this out if you like. It says, there was some correspondence with the registration team prior to registering the application in which they asked for confirmation of the proposed use of the building. We confirm that the building would be used for visiting family and friends with some holiday letting. The description given to the application suggests it would be used solely for holiday letting, which was not the intention. My clients have confirmed that holiday letting was of least importance and something they simply considered as a potential future project. And then it says, with this in mind and in light of the apparent concerns raised by neighbours, my clients no longer have plans to holiday let the property. And then it goes on further to this, and since the proposed use would be solely for visiting family stroke friends, i.e. incidental to the enjoyment of the dwelling house and ancillary to the existing dwelling, we would suggest a more accurate description for the application that reflects the intended use for the proposal would be alteration and extension of domestic outbuilding to form annex accommodation, and then it just looks for that. So yes, they're saying there would be a variety of uses to that. There would be visiting people to their dwelling house that would be using that, but I think the key point is they're saying it would be used for purposes ancillary to the dwelling house that's already on the site. So that's one of the key things. In relation to the other reason for refusal, there is, sorry if I've lost my place slightly here, but you did read out the reasons for the decision. So now moving to, it's page 130 something, 136 possibly, where you've got the reasons for refusal. Just bear with me, Chair. Yeah. You've got reason 3, that there's a concern the development would not retain the form of a traditional outbuilding contrary to MPF 4 Policy 9 or be sympathetic to or respect the local built form of the area contrary to LDP2 Policy OP2 and MPF 4 Policy 17A in terms of design quality and placemaking, and furthermore the development could give rise to a potential material loss of privacy to adjoining residents. You've also got the second part of condition 1, where it says the proposed domestic annex fails to accord with Dumfries and Galloway local development plan policies OP1, OP2 and H8 and supplementary guidance on alterations and extensions to houses. And that includes direct reference at section 6 to residential annexes on the grounds that it is significantly over large and overbearing, and as a result of the prominent position of the proposed domestic annex, the massing scale and design would be unsympathetic to and not respect the adjacent dwelling houses or the overall street scene. So you're quite right, there are other reasons for refusal beyond those which I've talked about earlier.
Yeah, but I think I asked you about the case officer had suggested that because the annex was of a significant size, it was still reasonable to apply flood prevention considerations to the development. And I think that was contrary to what you were suggesting because of the advice you were giving members today.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, that's correct. What I'm saying is this is development within the curtilage of a dwelling house, and therefore it's not the creation of a new dwelling house or a separate unit. It's something that's ancillary to the existing dwelling house, and on that basis, I don't think it, when I look at the SEPA flood risk and land use vulnerability guidance from July 2024, I don't think that triggers any considerations relevant under that guidance. So yeah, there is a difference of viewpoint there.
Thanks very much, Robert. Any other members have any questions for our planning advisor? If not, members, we're in session and we make a decision on the appeal. In that case, it would appear, given the advice that Robert has given us, that it would be unreasonable to continue to apply any flood risk to the decision of the case officer. However, in my opinion, reason for refusal 1 and reason for refusal 3 still stands. So I would propose that we delete the grounds of refusal number 2 and support the officer's decision on 1 and 3 of the grounds for refusal and refuse the application on that basis. But I'm happy to take any other proposal that members might have. If there are no other proposals, I take it that's a unanimous decision of the local review body, and I ask our clerk Tracy to confirm what members have decided today. Tracy, please.
Thanks, Chair. I also noted the Independent Plan Advisor's comments about the description. So in coming to that decision, are members happy for me to note in the minute that they're agreeing to amend the description of the application? I'm just looking for confirmation of that. We can certainly note it in the minute of decision.
I'd certainly be happy to do that with your guidance, Tracy, as governance officer. Thank you.
I think it would help in coming to the decision that you want to vary. If that's what members are choosing to do, then there would be a reasoning for that noted within the minute as to how you came to that conclusion.
Fine with me if members are content, yes.
Thanks, Chair.
And I'm happy to take advice for a planning officer or our guidance from our planning advisor today as well, just on the phraseology of the decision.
Thanks, Chair. Just the only suggestion I had was in relation to the description, and it was to change it to alterations and extension of domestic outbuilding and dwelling house to form annex accommodation and installation of septic tank and soakaway. Part of that is technical, because very technically you've got the carport element butting up against the gable of the original house, so very technically it's an extension to the dwelling house too. But that was all really, it was just for purposes of clarification, because the agent was complaining about the description that had been given. I wanted to give that some attention today. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Robert. In that case, for your advice and with the guidance from our governance officer, if Tracy can just confirm what we've decided and what will be recorded in a minute, I'd be happy with that.
Thank you, Chair. So members have agreed to alter the description of the application to Kenway House, Parton, Castle Douglas, refusal of planning permission for alteration and extension of domestic outbuilding to form annex accommodation, installation of septic tank and soakaway. And it's reference 250610. And that's in reaching their decision with the removal of the holiday lets, we have agreed to vary, members have agreed to vary the decision, and that is to proceed with the grounds of refusal condition 1 and condition 3 and removing the condition 2. So that's varying the decision of the appointed officer.
Thanks very much, Tracy. And all members had full knowledge of the advice of the planning officer or planning advisor today before making that decision. So I'm content with that. And in that case, thank you very much, Robert, Tracy, Fiona and members for your attendance today. I have no further business. Thank you very much.